The moment King Charles placed the late Queen's tiara into Catherine's hands, something inside Camilla cracked in complete silence. Because this wasn't just jewelry changing owners, this was power shifting in broad daylight. This was history choosing its next queen while the current queen consort stood frozen, watching everything she had fought decades to claim slip toward another woman without a single word spoken. Buckingham Palace didn't erupt in chaos that day. There were no screams, no slammed doors, no public scandal, just something far more dangerous. The kind of quiet betrayal that travels through marble hallways like poison, invisible but deadly. And everyone who mattered felt it immediately, because they understood exactly what this meant. For Camilla, this wasn't supposed to happen like this. Not after everything she endured, not after the years of humiliation, the endless whispers, the way the world never let her forget she was once the most hated woman in Britain, the outsider who dared to take a place beside the future king. While another woman still lived in the hearts of millions, she had waited patiently, strategically, surviving storms that would have destroyed anyone weaker, reshaping her image piece by piece until she finally stood beside Charles as queen consort, wearing the crown she had been denied for so long. But titles are fragile things. They look permanent, but they are held together by something far more unstable: perception. And perception can change overnight with a single gesture. And that gesture came wrapped in diamonds and history when Charles made his decision. The tiara wasn't just any tiara, it was one of the late Queen Elizabeth II's most sacred pieces, worn during defining moments of her reign. Moments where the monarchy wasn't just surviving, but asserting its dominance, its continuity, its unbreakable presence in a world constantly trying to move past it. To wear it meant more than looking regal, it meant being chosen. It meant being trusted. It meant being seen as the future of the institution itself. And when Charles gave it to Catherine, he wasn't just lending her jewelry, he was making a statement that echoed louder than any speech he could ever give. Camilla stood there, composed on the outside, but inside something ancient and furious began to rise, because she understood symbolism better than anyone. She understood that in royal life, nothing is accidental, nothing is casual, every move is calculated, every appearance choreographed, every object assigned with meaning. And this meaning was impossible to ignore. Catherine wasn't just being honored, she was being positioned. Positioned as the next face of monarchy. Positioned as the woman who would carry forward the legacy of Elizabeth herself. Positioned as the queen the world was already prepared to love. What made it worse wasn't the act itself, it was how effortlessly it happened. Catherine hadn't demanded it. She hadn't fought for it. She hadn't spent decades clawing her way through public hatred to earn her place. It was simply given to her, handed over like destiny had always planned it this way. And that effortless acceptance was the cruelest insult of all, because Camilla knew how hard she had worked to be seen, to be accepted, to be forgiven, and yet here was Catherine receiving the one thing Camilla had secretly hoped would be hers someday. Inside the palace, whispers began immediately. Quiet conversations between aides, staff, advisors, each one pretending neutrality while secretly choosing sides. They understood what this moment represented, even if the public didn't yet see it clearly. This wasn't just about honoring Catherine, this was about confirming her supremacy within the royal hierarchy. And supremacy inside the monarchy isn't declared with words, it's declared with symbols, and the tiara was the loudest symbol imaginable. Camilla didn't confront Charles. She didn't question him. She didn't allow even the smallest crack to show on her carefully constructed mask, because she had learned long ago that power isn't maintained through emotional reactions, it's maintained through patience, through calculation, through understanding when to strike and when to remain still. But inside her mind, the questions burned relentlessly. Had Charles chosen Catherine over her? Had he decided that the future of the monarchy belonged not to his queen, but to his son's wife? Had she spent her entire life fighting for a position that was never truly hers to hold? Charles himself wasn't blind to what he had done. He understood the implications. He understood the tension it would create. But Charles had always lived between two worlds, the world of personal loyalty and the world of institutional survival. And when forced to choose, the monarchy always came first. Catherine represented stability. She represented popularity. She represented the kind of modern image the monarchy desperately needed to survive in a century that questioned its very existence. Camilla represented loyalty, yes, but Catherine represented the future. And futures are ruthless. They don't wait for permission. They don't apologize for replacing what came before. They simply arrive, unstoppable. Catherine, for her part, understood the gravity of what had been given to to her. She wasn't naive. She knew this wasn't just a gift, it was a burden disguised as honor. Because wearing that tiara meant stepping into a role that came with invisible enemies, silent resentment, and expectations that could destroy anyone who failed to meet them. She knew Camilla would see it. She knew everyone would see it. But she also knew refusing it wasn't an option. Refusal would be weakness, and weakness inside the monarchy is fatal. So she accepted it with the same calm composure that had defined her rise from ordinary woman to future queen. She accepted it knowing it would ignite tensions. She accepted it knowing it would confirm what many already believed, that she, not Camilla, was the true center of the monarchy's future. The first time Camilla saw Catherine wearing it, something inside her went completely still. Catherine didn't flaunt it. She didn't smirk. She didn't need to. The tiara itself spoke everything. It transformed her, elevated her, connected her directly to Elizabeth's legacy in a way that no title alone ever could. And in that moment, Camilla realized something terrifying. She wasn't competing with Catherine anymore. She was being replaced by her. Not immediately, not officially, but symbolically. And symbols are what truly define royalty. Staff noticed the shift instantly. The subtle change in how Catherine was treated, the extra attention, the careful positioning, the way conversations paused when she entered a room. Respect inside the palace isn't given freely. It's earned through signals. And Catherine had just received the strongest signal possible. Camilla remained present, remained composed, remained queen consort in title and appearance. But something invisible had changed. She wasn't at the center anymore. She was orbiting it. And Catherine was the one standing directly in the light. Charles watched all of this unfold with quiet awareness. He knew what this meant. He knew what it would cost. But he also knew there was no turning back. The monarchy needed Catherine, needed her popularity, needed her ability to connect with the public increasingly skeptical of royal privilege, needed her to secure its future long after Charles himself was gone. And in choosing the monarchy's future, he had unknowingly ignited a silent war within his own household. Because Camilla wasn't the kind of woman who simply accepted displacement. She had spent her life surviving rejection, humiliation, and exile. She had learned how to endure, how to wait, how to reclaim what was threatened. And as she watched Catherine wearing the late queen's tiara, she didn't see a conclusion. She saw the beginning of something far more dangerous. Because inside the palace, power never disappears. It only changes hands. And those who lose it rarely surrender without consequence. Camilla didn't sleep that night, not truly, because humiliation doesn't let the mind rest. It replays itself endlessly, sharpening every detail, every glance, every second, where Catherine stood glowing under the weight of the late queen's tiara, while Camilla stood nearby, smiling for cameras that no longer saw her the same way, smiling for a world that had quietly begun shifting its loyalty towards someone younger, someone more adored, someone whose presence didn't come burdened with decades of scandal and whispered resentment. She lay awake staring into darkness, replaying Charles's face in her mind, searching for signs she might have missed, signs that this moment had been inevitable all along, signs that he had already chosen the monarchy's future over the woman who had stood beside him when no one else would. Because Charles had always been a man divided between his heart and his duty, and Camilla had spent her life believing that eventually, after everything, she would finally become both his heart and his duty combined, inseparable, unquestioned, permanent. But the tiara had shattered that illusion in the most elegant and devastating way possible. It wasn't given to Catherine out of kindness. It was given out of necessity. And necessity is ruthless. It doesn't care about loyalty. It doesn't care about history. It cares only about survival. Catherine was survival. Catherine was renewal. Catherine was the monarchy's insurance policy against irrelevance. Camilla understood this with terrifying clarity. She understood that public affection had become a currency more valuable than titles themselves, and Catherine possessed that currency in abundance without ever appearing to seek it. Everywhere Catherine went, crowds gathered with genuine warmth, their admiration instinctive, effortless, uncontaminated by the complicated history that clung to Camilla like a shadow that never fully disappeared. Camilla had earned her title through endurance, but Catherine had earned her influence through love. And love is far more powerful than endurance. Inside the palace, subtle changes continued to unfold like quiet earthquakes. Invitations were structured differently. Catherine's appearances were prioritized. Her image was increasingly associated with continuity, stability, stability, hope. Staff members who once focused primarily on Camilla now found themselves drawn toward Catherine's orbit, not out of disloyalty, but out of instinct, because institutions always gravitate toward their future, and Catherine was undeniably that future. Charles noticed it too. He noticed the way Catherine carried herself differently now, not with arrogance, but with certainty. The tiara hadn't changed her personality, but it had changed how others perceived her. She was no longer simply the princess of Wales. She was becoming something more inevitable, something unavoidable, something that even Charles himself could no longer ignore. He saw in her the same quiet strength that had once defined Elizabeth, the same ability to command respect without demanding it, the same unspoken authority that made the monarchy feel permanent rather than fragile. But Charles also saw Camilla. He saw the careful composure she maintained, the flawless performance she gave in public, the way she never allowed even a flicker of resentment to escape into the open. And that frightened him more than anger ever could, because Camilla's silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. It was adaptation. It was the mind of someone who had survived impossible odds before and knew how to survive them again. Camilla began studying Catherine more closely after that night. Not openly, not obviously, but carefully, observing the way she moved, the way she spoke, the way she connected with people without seeming to try. She watched how Catherine balanced tradition with modernity, how she respected the institution without becoming consumed by it. And somewhere deep inside, Camilla realized the most painful truth of all. Catherine wasn't an enemy created by ambition. She was an inevitability created by evolution. That realization didn't erase Camilla's resentment. It deepened it, because inevitability cannot be negotiated with. It cannot be reasoned with. It simply arrives and takes its place. William, meanwhile, had seen enough palace wars in his lifetime to recognize the warning signs. He saw the way Camilla's silence lingered too long. He saw the tension behind her smiles. He saw the invisible fracture forming beneath the surface of royal unity, and he knew Catherine was now standing at the center of it. William had spent his entire life watching how power inside the palace could elevate and destroy people with equal efficiency. He had watched his mother be loved by the public and quietly undermined by the institution meant to protect her. He had learned that survival required vigilance, that threats rarely announced themselves openly, that the most dangerous conflicts were the ones fought without words. He became more protective of Catherine after the tiara appeared on her head, not in obvious ways, not in ways that would invite suspicion, but in subtle ways, ensuring she was never isolated, ensuring she was never exposed to situations she couldn't control, ensuring that the institution understood clearly that Catherine was not alone, because William knew the truth that few others dared to acknowledge. Catherine wasn't just his wife anymore. She was the monarchy's future queen, and futures must be protected at all costs. Catherine herself felt the weight of that future settling onto her shoulders with increasing intensity. The tiara had been beautiful, yes, but it had also been heavy, heavier than she had expected, not physically, but symbolically. It had transformed how she was seen, how she was treated, how she was expected to exist. Every gesture she made now carried amplified meaning. Every appearance became a declaration of continuity. Every smile became reassurance to a public desperate to believe in something permanent. She never spoke about the tension she felt with Camilla. She never acknowledged it publicly or privately, because she understood that acknowledging it would make it real, would give it shape, would turn silent tension into visible conflict. And visible conflict is something the monarchy cannot afford. So she maintained her composure, her discipline, her unshakable calm. She became exactly what the tiara demanded her to be. Camilla watched all of this unfold with eyes that missed nothing. She understood now that her battle wasn't against Catherine personally. It was against time itself, against the natural progression of monarchy from one generation to the next, against the inevitable fading of her own centrality as Catherine's influence grew stronger with each passing day. But Camilla was not weak. She had never been weak. She had survived public hatred that would have broken anyone else. She had endured decades of rejection and emerged with a crown on her head. And women like Camilla do not disappear quietly. They do not surrender their influence simply because the future has arrived. They adapt, they evolve, they wait. And somewhere inside Buckingham Palace, beneath its flawless public image, beneath its centuries of ritual and tradition, beneath its carefully constructed illusion of unity, the silent war continued, not with accusations, not with confrontation, but with positioning, perception, and patience. Because the tiara had done more than decorate Catherine. It had declared her as the monarchy's next center of gravity, declared her as the woman who would outlast everyone else currently standing in those gilded halls, declared her as the future that could no longer be delayed. And Camilla, standing in that same palace, wearing her crown but feeling the shift beneath her feet, understood wanted something that few people ever experience in their lifetime. She understood what it felt like to win everything and still feel the beginning of the end.